Hi, how you doing? Thanks for tuning in. I hope you will find this video useful. It is going to be about part one of our cognition unit. And in part one, we're going to talk about thinking. So let's pull it up. What is thinking? Thinking or cognition refers to a process that involves knowing, understanding, remembering, and communicating. So cognition includes memory. I'm kind of doing that as a sort of a separate little unit, but just so you know, memory is part of cognition, part of thinking. Cognitive psychologists who study thinking and intelligence and language. Here's kind of a list of what they would research: problem solving, decision making, how we make judgments. So what are concepts? These are the basic building blocks of thought. They're mental groupings of similar objects. For instance, the concept of chair. There's lots of different types of chairs, shapes of chairs, color chairs, chairs made out of metal, made out of wood. They're all different, but we have one concept, which is chair. And that's what we use to think about all of those objects that are different. We think about them in the same way when we use the word chair. When we organize concepts in our mind, we usually organize them into hierarchies. So for instance, if you had the concept of dog and it was black lab, that would be under mixed breed, dogs, domesticated animals. So our mind kind of automatically creates these hierarchies in our brain, in our memory, that reflect the reality of the world. When we develop concepts, a lot of times we do it with mental images, but sometimes we do it with something called a prototype. For example, if you have the concept bird, a prototype might be a robin, which is like the most commonly occurring bird. If you shut your eyes and say bird, what comes to mind? Maybe a robin. Probably not a penguin or an ostrich, because those are birds, but they're not typical. They're not typical looking. So prototype is the most typical example of a concept. All right, let's go to problem solving. This is where thinking becomes important. We're trying to solve problems all the time. You lose your phone, that's a problem. How are you going to solve it? You have a big exam, that's a problem. How are you going to solve it? You're in a relationship, you want to get out of the relationship, that's a problem. How are you going to solve it? So we're constantly solving problems. And psychologists have identified 4 ways that we solve problems: algorithms, heuristics, intuition, and insight. So let's see what those are about. An algorithm is a methodical approach that exhausts all possibilities for solving the problem. Computers use algorithms. They can be very time consuming. Here's an example. You lose your phone. The last time you had it was in my class. So if you used an algorithm to find your phone, you would walk in and you would go back and forth across my room in rows, back and forth, till you covered every square inch of the classroom. That would be a systematic, methodical approach to finding your phone. Time consuming and probably not the best way to do it. What you would probably do to find your phone was use a heuristic. A heuristic is a simple shortcut strategy that allows you to use judgments and solve problems more efficiently. Think of it as terms of like taking a shortcut. So if you were to find your phone using a heuristic and you knew it was in my room, you'd go straight to where your desk was. If it wasn't there, you'd come straight to me and ask me, and I would have it on my desk or something like that. So the heuristic is kind of the shortcut way to quickly solve the problem. It's less time consuming. You may make more errors because it's not systematic like an algorithm. For instance, if you're trying to unscramble this word, if you knew that the last letter was a Y, then you could probably unscramble it and you would see that it is psychology. Okay, another way to solve a problem is called intuition. This is your gut feeling, when you know something from instinctive feeling rather than conscious reasoning. Each day we make hundreds of judgments that are based on intuition, just our gut feeling. I've noticed it's important to listen to my intuition when I'm doing social media and I'm like, should I post this? I'll type something up and I'm like about to post it and I'll have this gut feeling and I'll be like, no, I shouldn't send this. I should not hit send. For a while, I hit send anyway, but now I've learned as I've gotten older, like, don't hit send when you have the gut feeling to not hit send. Final type of method to solve the problem is called insight. Insight is a sudden realization of a solution to a problem. Humans and animals both have these, and there's a famous experiment. A guy named Wolfgang Kohler experimented with chimpanzees. He had them in a room, and he hung a banana up high, and they were looking for, I thought I had a picture of that. The chimps were looking for the banana. They couldn't reach it though, but he had these wooden crates, these boxes. And so the chimps end up stacking the boxes up and getting the banana, which was like they had this insight, oh, I can stack the boxes and that will work, which is pretty high level of intelligence to figure that out. Okay, so those are different ways we solve problems. Now we need to talk about some obstacles, some things that get in the way of us solving problems. And it turns out that our mind does some things automatically that sometimes lead us astray when we're trying to find the answer to a problem. The first one I'm going to talk about is called the confirmation bias. This is when you have a belief and you're seeking information on that topic, but you only seek out information that confirms your bias. So if you like a politician, you only seek out information that says good stuff about him. So that would be the confirmation bias. Another problem is called fixation. Fixation is the inability to see a problem from a fresh perspective. It's like getting stuck in a rut. An example of fixation would be something called functional fixedness. If you think that a thing can only be used the way it was traditionally designed to be used, then you might not be able to solve a problem. For instance, if you're trying to hang a picture and you need to put a nail in the wall, but you don't have a hammer, but you have like a hardcover book right next to you, if you don't realize that the hardcover book could be used to hammer in the nail, then you won't be able to solve the problem. That would be functional fixedness, or like the bottom of your shoe. Take your shoe off and pound in the nail. So here's an example with functional fixedness. Could you take these three things in this picture, a candle, thumbtacks, and a match box, and could you mount the candle on a bulletin board? So if I gave this problem to people in class, they'd mess around with it for a while. Some of them would figure it out and they would come up with this, but other people would not figure that out, and that would be because of fixation, functional fixedness, in fact. Another problem to solve, if you had 6 matchsticks, how would you put them together to form 4 equilateral triangles? I'm going to tell you the answer in just a minute, but first I want to tell you about mental set. Mental set is a framework for thinking about a problem. If you approach a problem a certain way, could be shaped by your habits or how you've done things in the past, can make it easy to solve familiar problems. But if you have the wrong mental set, you will not be able to solve the problem. So with the matchsticks, where I just gave you 6 matchsticks and said to make 4 equilateral triangles, most people, when you do this in class, put them flat on the surface of the table and they just manipulate them. But what you need to do is make a 3-dimensional structure. So if your mental set, if the way you approach it is that it has to be flat, you will never solve the problem. You have to think 3-dimensionally. So framing is another thing that can affect how you solve a problem. Framing is when a concept or choice is presented to you in a certain way. And if it's presented to you one way, you respond with one response. And if it's presented to you in another way, you respond differently. Let me give you a couple of examples. For example, if you're at the grocery store and you're buying ground beef and it's labeled 25% fat, you're not going to buy it. But if it says 75% lean, people will buy it. Another example, maybe more pertinent to you if you don't go grocery shopping. would be you just met someone and they ask you, do you want to be my girlfriend starting right now? Or if they frame it differently and they said something like, do you want to get some coffee sometime? So you would react differently depending on what they say, right? Okay, we're moving right along. Heuristics, the shortcut way to solve a problem, sometimes can cause problems. And there's two ways. One is called the representativeness heuristic. That's when you judge the likelihood of things occurring in terms of how well they seem to match a prototype. So if you were told that you met a slim, short man who wears glasses and likes poetry, what do you think his profession is? An Ivy League professor or a truck driver? Well, that description matches the prototype of an Ivy League professor, not a truck driver, so you would guess that. Even though in reality there's like 100,000 truck drivers, so it's actually more likely that the person is a truck driver, but because of the representativeness heuristic, you would think Ivy League professor. Another type of heuristic is called the availability heuristic, and this is judging the likelihood of things in terms of how available in memory they are. So the availability heuristic leads you astray because if it increases the ease of retrieving information, you're more likely to give that answer. So how recently you heard about an event, how distinct it is, how much you see it on social media, all of those things make it more available. And when you're trying to solve a problem, it might make that answer more likely. Okay, we're going kind of fast. Just a few more things here. One is called overconfidence. A lot of people are overconfident about their beliefs and judgments, and that can really cloud your ability to solve the problem correctly. Another thing is called the belief perseverance. It's the tendency to cling to a belief even when there's contrary evidence. So something, you're getting facts and information that something is wrong, but you keep believing it's right no matter what. Okay, last slide. I want to just touch base on creative thinkers and typical thinkers. So a typical thinker, when solving a problem, you go through a process called convergent thought. It's when you're trying to figure out a concrete solution to a problem and you're quick and you're accurate and you're logical. That's called convergent thinking. It's not creative, it's convergent. You're looking for one solution. Divergent thought is when you're being creative and you're exploring multiple possible solutions. To diverge is to go different ways. So divergent thought, you're generating creative ideas. It's more spontaneous, it's free-flowing, it's not linear, and that's more typical of creative thinkers. Okay, that's it for today. That is part 1. And see me in class if you have any questions. There will be 3 more parts to our cognition unit.